The night Grayson Aldwell turned 42, he sat alone in his car outside the most expensive hotel in Vancouver and cried. Not the kind of crying that comes with sound, the quiet kind. The kind where you don't even notice it's happening until you catch your reflection in the window and realize your face looks wrong, like something inside got rearranged while you weren't paying attention. He hadn't planned to cry. He hadn't planned any of this. Not the way the evening fell apart, not the silence on the other end of the phone when he called his assistant to cancel the reservation. Not the particular sting of standing in the lobby of the Fairmont with his name on a table for 12 and watching the maitre d' inform him, with extraordinary politeness, that the reservation had been canceled 3 hours ago. By who? Grayson had asked. The maitre d' simply said he wasn't in a position to share that information. 12 years. He had built Aldwell Capital from a rented desk in a Gastown co-working space into one of the most recognized investment firms west of Toronto. He had 47 employees. He had a penthouse in Cole Harbour. He had, until 8 weeks ago, a fiancée named Brooke who had smiled at him across that same desk in Gastown when she was a 24-year-old marketing consultant and told him she believed in him. Brooke had canceled the reservation. He knew that. He just didn't know yet how to hold the knowing of it without it breaking something. He wiped his face with the back of his hand and got out of the car. There was a diner 2 blocks away. The kind of place that had been there since before the neighborhood got renovated into something people put on Instagram. A neon sign that said Betty's flickered in the November rain. The windows were fogged from the inside. Through the glass he could see the shapes of people eating, heads bent over plates, a waitress moving between tables with the unhurried ease of someone who had been doing the same walk for 20 years. Grayson stood on the sidewalk in a $1,200 coat and stared at that diner for a long moment. Then he went inside. The warmth hit him first, then the smell, coffee and maple syrup and something frying, bacon maybe, or hash browns. A bell above the door announced him, and nobody looked up except a small girl in a yellow raincoat sitting in the booth nearest the door, who stared at him with the frank, unashamed assessment that only children and animals are capable of. She was maybe 6. Her hair was in 2 lopsided braids that someone had clearly attempted and partially abandoned. She had a crayon in her hand and a placemat menu in front of her that she had been coloring with impressive commitment. "Your coat is very shiny," she said. "Thank you," Grayson said. "It looks like it cost a lot of money, Penny." The woman across from her said it quietly, but it landed with the weight of a whole conversation they'd had before and would have again. She didn't look up from the menu she was holding. "Sorry," Penny said, and then immediately looked back at Grayson. "Does it cost a lot of money?" Grayson opened his mouth. "Penny," the woman's voice was patient, tired in the way that has nothing to do with sleep. She put the menu down and Grayson got his first real look at her. She was younger than he'd expected. Early 30s maybe, with the kind of face that would look the same for another 20 years and then all at once change. Dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer was hiding. A coat that was clean and pressed but had seen better years. Her name tag, he noticed, was sitting on the table beside the sugar dispenser, rather than pinned to her shirt, which suggested she had recently gotten off work somewhere. "I'm sorry," she said to him. "She doesn't have a filter." "I've noticed," Grayson said, and he almost smiled. The almost surprised him. The diner was full, not bursting, but full enough that the only open seats were at the counter, which was sticky in the way that suggested it had been wiped down, but not quite clean. Grayson looked at it. He looked at the booth. The woman and her daughter were on one side, and the other bench was empty. "Would you mind?" he started. "Oh, of course!" She gestured at the empty bench across from her. "Please." He sat down and immediately felt the strangeness of it, the intimacy of sitting across a table from 2 strangers in a diner, while rain hit the windows and the smell of coffee got stronger. The waitress came, an older woman with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and the name June on her badge. And Grayson ordered coffee and the turkey club because it was the first thing he saw. The woman across from him ordered pancakes for Penny and soup for herself, and he noticed without meaning to that she ordered the smallest size. "I'm Ren," she said. "Ren Galloway. And this is Penny? Grayson? Just Grayson? Aldwell." She nodded like the name meant nothing to her, which it probably didn't, and something about that was unexpectedly pleasant. "Are you from Vancouver?" she asked. "Born here. We just moved here 6 months ago." She glanced at Penny, who had gone back to her placemat. From Sudbury, big change. That was the idea. She said it lightly, but her hands were wrapped around a water glass and her knuckles were pale. Penny looked up. We moved because of my dad, she said. Penny, we did though. You said we needed a fresh start. I said we needed a new adventure. Ren said it gently, with the careful precision of someone who has learned that the words you use around children become the words they use to explain their lives to strangers. Penny considered this, and because of Dad. Ren closed her eyes for half a second. When she opened them, she looked at Grayson with the expression of someone who has learned to find the humor in situations where humor is the only available option. Fresh start, she confirmed. The food came. Grayson's turkey club was enormous and impractical, and somehow exactly what he needed. Penny poured an amount of maple syrup onto her pancakes that was arguably criminal, and Ren reached over and redirected the bottle before any structural damage occurred. Is today a special day? Penny asked. She was looking at Grayson. Why do you ask? You're very dressed up for a diner. I had plans that changed. She absorbed this with the seriousness of a child being told something adult-shaped. Did someone cancel on you? Grayson looked at her. Yes, he said. Someone canceled on me. That happened to me once. My friend Olivia said she was coming to my birthday and then she didn't come. But her mom said she had a stomachache. Penny cut a piece of pancake with the side of her fork, slowly, frowning. I don't think she had a stomachache, Penny, Ren said softly. I'm just saying what happened. I know what you're saying, Bug. Eat your pancakes. Penny ate a bite. Then, is today your birthday? Grayson set his sandwich down. Outside the window, the rain had gotten heavier. He could see the glow of his car's hazard lights 2 blocks away where he'd left it running because he forgot to turn them off. And that seemed about right somehow. The kind of small thing that falls apart when a bigger thing falls apart first. Yeah, he said. It is. The silence that followed was 3 seconds long. Then Penny stood up in the booth, and before anyone could stop her, she started to sing Happy Birthday in the unself-conscious, slightly off-key way of a 6-year-old who has absolutely no concept of a diner full of strangers. Every head turned. Grayson felt something move through him that he didn't have a name for. When she finished, she sat back down and picked up her fork. You can make a wish if you want, she said. It counts even without a cake. Penny, Ren said, and her voice had gone a little strange. That was very sweet. He looked like he needed it. Grayson looked across the table at this small person with her lopsided braids and her utter conviction about how the world worked. And the thing he didn't have a name for settled somewhere behind his sternum and stayed. Thank you, he said, and he meant it more than he'd meant most things in recent memory. He came back the next Friday. He told himself it was because Betty's had the best coffee he'd found in years, which was partially true. The coffee was excellent, but the booth nearest the door was empty, and he felt the absence of the yellow raincoat and the crayon drawings more than he expected to. He came back the Friday after that, and the one after that, and on the 3rd Friday Ren was there. She was still in her coat, name tag on the table, the same tired patience in the set of her shoulders. Penny was drawing on a napkin this time. The paper placement menus had been replaced with laminated ones, apparently, which Penny had announced was a tragedy. Ren looked up when he came in. Something in her face shifted. Not surprise, exactly. More like the adjustment of someone recalibrating. You come here on Fridays, she said. I do now. She looked at him for a moment that was slightly longer than a regular look. Then she gestured at the bench across from her. Join us, she said. He did. It became, without either of them deciding it, a thing. Friday evenings, Betty's Diner, the booth by the window. Penny always had something urgent to report. A classroom incident, a new opinion about rain, a philosophical question that had been bothering her all week. Ren listened to both of them with the same quality of attention, the kind that makes you feel like what you're saying actually matters, instead of just filling time. He learned things about her slowly, the way you learn things about people in diners. In pieces, between other pieces. She worked at a medical clinic as an administrative coordinator. She had grown up in Sudbury, daughter of a high school teacher and a woman who ran a small alterations shop. She had married at 28, a man named Kevin Galloway, who was, in Ren's carefully chosen words, not a person who had grown up yet and possibly never would. The divorce had been finalized in the spring. Penny was the reason she had stayed as long as she had, and then Penny was the reason she had left. Kevin had not contested the divorce. He had not asked for any arrangement with Penny. He was, in Ren's assessment, a man who loved the idea of family without any interest in the actual work of it. He had not called in 4 months. "Does that make you angry?" Grayson asked one evening. Penny had fallen asleep against her arm, cheek pressed to Ren's shoulder, yellow raincoat pulled over her like a blanket. Ren looked at her daughter for a moment. "Sometimes," she said. "Mostly I'm just past it, I think. You grieve it and then you get on with things." "Does she ask about him?" "Less than she used to. She asked me last month why some dads don't want to be dads. And I told her that some people are still figuring out how to grow up and that it wasn't anything about her." She paused. She said okay and went back to her drawing. I don't know if that's healthy or if she's just very good at compartmentalizing. Her therapist says she's doing well. She's 6 and she has a therapist? I believe in being proactive. She said it without apology. I'd rather get ahead of things than have her carry something unnecessarily. He liked that about her. The directness, the absence of performance. Brooke had been extraordinary at performance. She had built an entire career out of it, built an entire version of their relationship out of it. And he had been so impressed by the performance that he had not thought to look for the thing underneath. He told Ren about Brooke on the 5th Friday. Not everything, not right away, but the essential shape of it. 10 years together, 2 years engaged, and then a conversation in their kitchen at 7 in the morning, where Brooke said she didn't think she had ever actually wanted the life they were building, and wasn't sure when she had stopped saying so. Ren listened without interjecting. "I think," she said when he finished, "that the hardest part isn't the person leaving. It's realizing you'd built a future that only ever existed in your own head." He had not thought of it that way. He thought about it for most of the drive home. The first time things went wrong was in January. He had been helping Ren quietly. So quietly, he told himself, that it barely counted. She had mentioned offhand that Penny's school was asking for an updated immunization record, and the walk-in clinic she'd been using had a 6-week wait for family doctors. So he'd called a colleague at St. Paul's and arranged a same-day appointment. He hadn't told her how he'd arranged it. Then he had mentioned the rental market, and she said she was looking to move somewhere with a yard for Penny, and he had, without thinking, or thinking too much, or both, mentioned a townhouse that belonged to a property he co-owned in Kitsilano that had just come available. The rent he quoted was below market, significantly below. She had stopped walking. They were on the seawall, Penny running ahead chasing pigeons, and Ren had stopped and looked at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her face before. "What kind of investor are you?" she asked. He had not hidden it, exactly. He had simply not volunteered it. His name meant something in certain circles and nothing in others, and at Betty's he had been very comfortable being nothing. "Aldwell Capital," he said. She looked at him for a long moment, long enough that a seagull landed near them, reconsidered, and left. Why didn't you say something? It didn't seem relevant." Her voice was level, not angry, which was almost worse than angry. "Grayson, you called someone at St. Paul's for Penny. You offered me a rental that you own. I wanted to help. I know you did." "I know." She pressed her lips together. "But I didn't need you to fix things. I was figuring them out. The wait time for Penny was 6 weeks. I know how long the wait was. I had managed longer waits before you." She was quiet for a moment. "I don't want to be a project. This isn't about being stubborn. I moved here because I needed to do things myself, on my own terms. I need to know I can." He understood it intellectually. He even understood why it mattered. What he struggled to find, standing on the seawall in January with the mountains reflected in the water, was the distance between helping and taking over that he had apparently misjudged. "I'm sorry," he said. She nodded. Penny came racing back from the pigeons, out of breath and thrilled with herself. "There were 12 of them," she announced. "That is a significant number of pigeons," Ren said, and her voice was back to its normal register, and Grayson felt the conversation fold closed around them like a door going quietly shut. He gave her space in February. Not complete absence. They still had Fridays, mostly, though 2 of them got cancelled for reasons that were plausible but felt pointed. He did not offer help. He did not mention the property or the colleague at St. Paul's, or any of the quiet machinery he had put in motion without asking. What he did not know until Ren called him on a Tuesday evening in March sounding like she had been running, was that Kevin had come back. Not to Vancouver. Kevin was still in Sudbury. But his lawyer had filed paperwork for custody, not primary custody, not even shared custody, but visitation rights, which in the specific language of the filing was framed as the beginning of a longer process. Ren's own lawyer had called her at work. She had picked up Penny from after-school care and they had walked home, and she had made dinner and read Penny 2 books, and then she had sat on the bathroom floor after Penny was asleep, and she had called Grayson. She had not called her mother first, or her friend Rosalind, or anyone else. She had called him, and he understood, even as he was putting his coat on, that this was its own kind of statement. He drove to her apartment, the apartment she had found herself. 3 floors up in a building in East Vancouver that had a small balcony and a storage locker, and enough room for Penny's easel in the corner of the living room. She buzzed him up without saying anything through the intercom and opened the door, and she was still in her work clothes, and her eyes were dry in a way that meant she had already done whatever crying there was going to be. "He's never once asked to see her," she said, before he was fully inside. "In 4 months. Not a call, not a text, not nothing. And now suddenly there's a lawyer. Why now?" Grayson asked. His mother. Ren sat on the couch and pulled a throw pillow into her lap. His mother decided she wanted a relationship with Penny. Kevin's the only route to that. So he's doing it for his mother. He's doing it because his mother wants him to, which is exactly the kind of adult he is. She exhaled. "My lawyer says we have a strong case. He hasn't been present. There's no established relationship. But she also said it could take a year. The hearings, the evaluations." She stopped. "I can't have Penny going through evaluations. She's 6. What does your lawyer need?" "Documentation. Records of everything I've done alone. Medical appointments, school pickups, financial records showing I'm providing for her." She looked up. "I have most of it. My clinic keeps records. Her school has attendance logs. And the financial piece. I'm fine financially." She said it like she was reminding herself as much as telling him. "I've been fine. I've managed. I know you have." They sat for a moment with the city sounds coming through the balcony door, which was cracked even in March because Ren liked the cold air. "I'm not going to offer anything," he said carefully, "because I know you don't want that, and I know you don't need it. But if there's ever something specific, something your lawyer identifies as a gap, I want you to tell me." She looked at him for a long moment. "Okay," she said quietly. He stayed until midnight. They drank tea and talked about things that had nothing to do with Kevin or lawyers. About a documentary she'd watched about humpback whales, about a trip he'd taken to Tofino years ago before he'd had money, and how it was different now going back. Around 11, Penny appeared in the hallway in her pajamas with her hair flattened from sleep, looked at Grayson with the pure unself-consciousness of the recently unconscious, and said, "Why are you here?" "I came to visit your mom, in the nighttime." "Penny," Ren said. "Adults visit each other at night," Penny said, working it out. "Because you work in the daytime," she considered Grayson. "Are you her friend?" "Yes," he said. "I'm her friend." Penny thought about this. "Then, are you going to be her boyfriend?" "Penny, because Rosalind's mom has a boyfriend who comes at night and they call each other babe." "Do you call each other babe?" Ren covered her face with both hands. "We do not," Grayson said, with as much composure as he had available. "You should probably try it," Penny said, and walked back down the hallway and went to bed. The custody hearing was set for May. Kevin's lawyer was competent, and his mother had driven down from Sudbury and was sitting in the waiting room, with the specific expression of a woman who had decided she was the wronged party, in a story where she had no particular role. Ren's lawyer, a sharp-edged woman named Tara Fong, who had the quality of a person who had won many arguments by simply being better prepared than everyone else, had assembled what she described as a comprehensive record. She had also, it turned out, recognized Grayson's name and spent approximately 4 seconds deciding not to ask how he knew her client. He sat in the waiting room, not inside, not with Ren's permission to do anything, just there, in case. Penny was at school, which had been the only logistical decision Ren had made with absolute certainty. Penny would not miss school for this, would not sit in this waiting room, would not be part of the machinery of this day. The hearing took 2 hours. Ren came out with Tara Fong 3 steps behind her, and the reading of her face was not the relief he expected. It was more complicated than relief, the kind of complicated that comes with winning something that should never have been a contest. "Supervised visitation only," she said. "Once a month. Kevin has to petition again after 6 months for any change." She looked at the window at the end of the hallway where the sun was doing something specific and beautiful with the March clouds. Tara says that given his track record, the 6-month petition is unlikely to go anywhere. That's good, he said. It is. She paused. She also said that the documentation package was unusually comprehensive. The school records, the medical history, the financial records. She looked at him. My clinic director wrote a letter. 2 of Penny's teachers wrote letters. I didn't ask them to do that. People who know you want to help. Tara seemed to think someone made some calls. Grayson said nothing. Ren looked at him for a long moment. I didn't ask you to do anything. You didn't. I said I needed to do this myself. You did. You did do it yourself, Ren. Every document in that package was yours. Every record was yours. The letters came from people who know you and know Penny. I didn't, he stopped. I may have made it easier to reach certain people. She exhaled. It was the kind of exhale that could go several directions. You didn't fix it, she said slowly. You just cleared some of the path. Something like that. I'm trying to decide if I'm angry about that. Are you? Another long look. Down the hallway, Kevin's mother was talking to someone in an undertone. Outside the window, a bus went by with an advertisement for a travel company on its side. Somewhere warm, somewhere with blue water. No, Ren said. I don't think I am. She reached out and took his hand. It was brief, a grip, a squeeze, and then she let go and they walked out of the courthouse together into the May sunshine. Penny's 7th birthday fell on a Saturday in June. Ren had planned a small party at a park in Kitts, the kind with a wading pool that Penny had been lobbying for since April. 6 children from her class, a cooler of juice boxes, a cake from the Portuguese bakery on Commercial that did lettering and had agreed to write Penny as 7 with a small drawing of a pigeon upon request. Grayson arrived with a gift that Penny had loudly and specifically requested. A set of professional-grade colored pencils that came in a tin case, and a folding chair he brought because he had learned, over the past 7 months, that the best thing he could do was show up, prepared to be useful without making a production of it. Penny saw him before he made it through the park gate. She ran the full distance between them at the speed of a child who has not yet learned to moderate enthusiasm for the sake of dignity, and she crashed into him with the certainty of someone who knows they will be caught. He caught her. You came, she said into his shoulder. Of course I came. Mom said she didn't know if you could. I could. She leaned back and looked at him. Her hair was in proper braids today, even, symmetrical, the work of someone who had taken time. She had a smear of something purple on her chin that was either marker or the beginning of the birthday cake consumption process. I wished for you, she said, at my birthday last year. In the diner. He looked at her. I wished that Mom would find someone who made her laugh, Penny said, with the matter-of-fact quality of a person filing a report. And then you came in, with your shiny coat. She seemed satisfied by this. I think that counts. Grayson's throat did something complicated. I think that definitely counts, he said. Across the park, Ren was laying out a tablecloth and watching them from across the distance with an expression that was not quite a smile and not quite something else. The expression of a person who has been through something difficult and emerged on the other side to find that the other side is better than they had planned for. He set Penny down and she ran back toward the wading pool, and he walked across the park to where Ren was standing with a tablecloth she hadn't finished spreading, and when he reached her, he took the other end without saying anything, and they got it flat together. She ran at you like a golden retriever, Ren said. She always does. You don't seem to mind. I don't mind at all. She smoothed a corner of the tablecloth and looked out at the park, the wading pool, the cluster of 6-year-olds already negotiating something with the intensity of small diplomats. I'm glad you came in out of the rain, she said. He looked at her. Me too. She reached over without looking at him and tucked her hand briefly into his, the same grip as the courthouse hallway, except this time she didn't let go. Penny screamed something delighted from the direction of the wading pool. The pigeon cake arrived 20 minutes late and was perfect.